Hi, everyone. Welcome to Creator Hangout here at Kickstarter with Dave Rauchwerk from OTTO and C.H.I.P. My name is John D'Amatos. I work at Kickstarter. I'm on the outreach team. I look over the design and tech categories. And today with us is Dave Rauchwerk, a builder of software and hardware, an alumni of the HAX Accelerator in Shenzhen, and founder and CEO of C.H.I.P, the world's first $9 computer. Dave, welcome.
Hey, John, how you doing?
Good, man. How's everything out in San Francisco? Out in Oakland?
Oakland, it's great. It's a little warm today, and it's also a little early for us here. It's just now passing 10 a.m.
Okay, well, you're nice and chipper for 9 a.m. So, Dave, you and I have known each other for a while. You've run two different projects with us. The first thing that I always want to ask everyone is, what is the origin story? What is the origin story of the $9 computer?
Okay, so the $9 computer. So it didn't really start out that way. It goes all the way back to this guy right here. So this was an animated GIF camera with a crank on the side of it. So if you can hold it, you can crank it. All right. So this was an art project that was done at an all animated GIF art show that was run by GAFTA, the Bay Area Foundation for the Arts, in San Francisco, and it was like an enormously fun thing to do. So we did it, and I had about 400 people lined up. And people were like, this is really great. There was no explanation. It was just there. You turn the crank, and then the GIFs would be projected about 50 feet on the side of a building with a giant, Christie 10K projector. And people were like, you should do a Kickstarter. Like, you should make a kit. And I was like, no, it was really hard. I don't want to do that. And so I thought about it some more, and I reached out to two of my close friends, Thomas and Gus. And I said, hey, guys, we should make a kit that people can make cameras with, because it was incredibly difficult to do this. That turned into OTTO, and that sort of spiraled out of control and became this sort of what ultimately ended up being the first commercial project based on the Raspberry Pi compute module. Mm-hmm. I have one here. So we kind of went from this to this in about 6 months. And then, we launched on a Kickstarter almost a year ago today.
That's right.
And we sold we have about 400 plus backers, thereabouts.
And for our audience out there, the first project that Dave is talking about is called OTTO, OTTO, and you can find it on our site by simply searching. I should also mention, it's a good moment to say that anybody out there who wants to ask us any questions, you can find us on Google+, on Twitter as Kickstarter Tips, and on Facebook as well. Keep going, Dave.
Yeah, so we have the big crank over here, and that sort of idea made its way into OTTO, which is this little guy right here. You can flip this out, you can rotate this, and then you can turn this crank.
I have one. I can attest that it's awesome.
Yes, awesome. So that was OTTO, and we've shipped a number of these, still shipping them out to backers. But you can see this one with a clear back on it. There's a lot of electronics inside of it. Everything on OTTO was made by us. We've designed everything from the crank to the electronics that go in the back to the display to all this sort of stuff.
That's incredible. You did everything from scratch.
From scratch.
That's amazing.
So the one thing that we didn't make from scratch on this camera is the actual little computer piece, right? Okay. And we had this phenomenal response to the Kickstarter campaign. Like, it's been super amazing. And there were a lot of, you could imagine, retailers reached out to us and like, hey, we'd love to carry this camera. And unfortunately, being a small company, we weren't able to make it for a price that we could ultimately sell to retailers and sort of get to that next step.
Right.
And so I talked to a bunch of other friends, and it seemed like this was a common problem of people sort of working on these kind of things. And we went back to China, where we had lived during Accelerator, and started trying to solve this problem. Like, how can we make OTTO, and how can we sell it instead of for $250? How can we sell it for $100? And so we started having conversations, and we figured out all of these things that we built for OTTO. The power supply, the charging, the Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth, the interaction with display, support for cameras even. How do we do all of that? And how do we do it in a way where you don't have to do it from scratch?
Right.
And it's cheap enough that you can build these $100 products like OTTO. Mm-hmm. And we said, okay, cool, that'll be great. Let's do that. So we get to the point where we've sort of figured everything out. We've got all of the pricing figured out, and we say, okay, based on 2.5 times the cost of the bill of materials, the computer that goes inside of OTTO needs to cost less than $10. So we get back, and it's like, I don't know, maybe March of this year, late March, and we got to start getting ready for a Kickstarter campaign, because we know that in order to do this, we have to buy a lot of components. Like,
so in a way, it's kind of like the long haul of like, in order to get OTTO done, this like beautiful like animated GIF camera done, you have to build a computer to that spec. But it turns out that the only real way to do that is to get enough people to buy into that idea.
Absolutely, yeah. And so we knew that that this thing we were working on, it didn't even have a name at this point. That it would be really cool for guys, like us, who were building these art projects and wanted to turn them into products. But we didn't really know what we had, and so I called my good friend Richard, who was a filmmaker in Austin at the time, and I said, "There he is." And I said, "Richard, you got to come out here. We need to figure out what's going on. We had a Kickstarter campaign, and because in the past, like all the videos we had done for Kickstarter, and we'd done everything ourselves. Like I shot the videos. Gus Kamas and I are starting them. And all that. So I was like, well, this time, like, we need to get more people involved, because we have to sell more than 400 of these things.
Right.
So I bring in Richard, and I said, Richard, like, we got to figure out what we got. So he's like, okay, well, what is it? I said, well, it's a $9 computer. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah. So after some, consternation and discussion, it occurs that, and maybe there's something interesting or intrinsically interesting about the computer itself, more so than the fact that we can now make, OTTO more accessible.
Right.
And then so through a lot of discussion, we sort of said to ourselves, and a lot of people have asked me about this since we've done the campaign, I have an idea I don't want to share with anyone because I want to keep it secret until the campaign launches. And we did that. We did CHIP in secret up until the point, Richard got here, we started talking about it, and we're like, oh no, the biggest risk we have is that nobody cares. Nobody understands what we're going to do, because we did everything in secret. So about 3 weeks before the campaign, we said, okay, don't post on Facebook or anything, but talk to anyone and tell them what, we're doing, and see what they think of it.
So who was anyone?
So anyone is a lot of people at the coffee shop down the street who actually called out in our Kickstarter thanks. So Kilovolt Coffee, huge shout out to you guys. I'll be going there after this. And yeah, literally anyone, like taxi drivers, people at dinner, people you run into in the street, like you're waiting for a bus, and it's like, hey, what do you think about a $9 computer?
So you're testing out your messaging. You're kind of testing out like the product idea and seeing how it resonates with different audiences.
Yeah, and also just, and sort of, and we say this a lot in the campaign, is like just trying to figure out what it is, right? And so the really interesting thing about that is, there's this video that that Richard put together on our Kickstarter campaign called "Designing Pocket Chip," right? And Pocket Chip went from cardboard prototype idea to launched live on Kickstarter to functional, demonstrated at Maker Faire in less than 40 days. And
that's in an update, right? Or is
it's an update, yeah.
It's a wonderful video.
Oh, thank you, yeah. So Richard did a great job on it. And so there he is again. Look, it's Richard. So the thing is, like, all these conversations we had, right, about what is this thing? When you show people, CHIP, right, world's first $9 computer. I should say this is a production chip, which we talk about in our most recent update.
Nice.
People would say, like, it's a computer, where's the screen? And you're like, what do you mean, where's the screen? And they're like, you say computer and you think like laptop,
Right.
And so that idea, talking to these, like, few hundred people amongst all of us, brought into this idea of, hey, like, we need a screen. And maybe it's not the $9 computer has a screen, but we need to accommodate people that are like, they love the idea of a computer that's accessible, but they're going to need to get a screen for it. What if we made a screen and keyboard that was done in the same style and with the same sort of approach as our $9 computer?
Okay.
And so, so that's how you got, interestingly enough, Pocket Chip. And so if you're talking sort of inside campaign baseball, Pocket Chip is basically half of our backers. And
right.
it was that decision, that we had decided, hey, like, let's go talk to people. Let's go see what they think of what we're doing and see if we can help them better understand it. For us, it was less about, selling more stuff. It was more about making sure that they understood what we were trying to accomplish. And when you see this handheld thing, it really, I think, connected the dots in a lot of people's minds.
So then in the same way that like CHIP, the $9 computer, was kind of the outcome of the needs of OTTO, Pocket evolved then again from CHIP. So so OTTO and Pocket Chip are these like amazing cousins that like kind of like meet in the middle through CHIP.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's kind of the thing is that these, one of the things when John and I first met, a little while ago, looking at OTTO, we both have backgrounds in interactive art, and you look at this and it's really like a tool for people to develop this sort of fun embedded software and installation art, but it doesn't look like a hacker's tool. It looks like a real product.
Right. It's very welcoming.
Yeah, exactly. And so this idea that a developer kit or a tool for developers or for artists could sort of hide in disguise as a real product is something that very much informs Pocket Chip, because Pocket Chip, for us as guys who like work with these embedded Linux computers and single board computers, you always need a screen, a keyboard, and a mouse, and it's always a pain. So we made sort of the ultimate hacker Game Boy. So it's got the GPIO breakouts, all those kind of things we wanted. But also, it takes the $9 computer that is really useful as a desktop and gives it a life as a mobile computer for regular, people who aren't necessarily want to hack with it.
Right.
And so we've tried to, they're related in that way, is we've tried to bridge those gaps. Like, what if we could make something that was really exciting to people like us, but also was a pathway for just people who were interested in this but didn't really know how to get into it or were intimidated by it, and give them a sort of ramp to get into our community.
So a couple of things that pertain to kind of people that admire your campaign and want to have a similar ambitious experience. Tell us a little bit about what Shenzhen was like, what it was like going there for the first time and being a part of HAX, and then kind of like having those conversations of like, okay, we need to build a computer that fits like our requirements for OTTO to make thousands of them. Like, what was that experience like as a first timer?
Oh yeah, so we all, the Thomas, Gus, and I, like, we always looked at Shenzhen as this sort of mythical place. We've read all of Bunny Huang's posts on his blog about how crazy Shenzhen is and all this stuff, and you're just like, I gotta see this place. And there was this feeling that we had that it was going to change and that it was going to disappear, and that like now is the moment for us to go. And so we didn't really. When we started with this, you saw the original, installation art project. To show it to you, this guy right here. This itself does not look like a business, right?
Right.
And maybe this doesn't to a lot of people, right? And I think to even more people, this doesn't look like it. And the thing was that we just wanted to go. We wanted to see what it was, and we needed a reason to be there, and that reason was OTTO. And it was just like an enormous, like, just crazy shock to go and sort of have to figure out the language, figure out how things were done over there, and also figure out our product at the same time. Mm-hmm. And the other thing to say is that, like, HAX it's an amazing experience, but at the end of the day, you're making things for people here, right? And so you have to make sure that, like, and you see it all the time when people come back, from HAX, and you have to make sure that you don't lose touch with what is important to people here, and more importantly, like, that you end up with what you set out to make, right? And the beautiful thing about our experience with it is that things have turned out better than we had imagined. When we started with this, mm-hmm. You can see a lot of the prototypes on our Kickstarter page for OTTO. This is a production camera. This is one of the ones that we ship. I would have never imagined that it would have come out like this, that it would feel the way that it does. And all along the way, it's just like, we've found a way to incorporate people's feedback and make sure that we take care of what people understand what we're going for. And you saw how we went from the art installation to the prototype to the production camera to ultimately like, oh man, people love what we're doing, but it's too expensive. How do we make it cheaper? Instead of saying like, you know what, let's just raise the price to $1,000.
Right.
And let's just sell 10 of them a month and be done with it. We're like, we really had this desire to make it accessible to as many people as possible, because for us, like, I want people to play with the thing that we worked on. And so by sort of focusing on that and embracing that, and just basically not knowing how difficult some of this stuff was before we did it, we sort of pursued that unreasonable idea, right?
Right, and that's always a big thing. That's always a big deal. Tell us a little bit about the team. Tell us about
Yeah.
and kind of the rest of the team that makes everything work.
Yeah, for sure. So people don't usually start this early. We usually start around 10:30 or 11, but and go pretty late. So there's Thomas back there. Thomas, wave. Yeah, designer of OTTO, Pocket Chip. There's Richard back there. Richard, give him a wave, right? So Richard is working on telling our story as
I should say I've seen hundreds of videos. Richard's is definitely one of my favorite videos.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot to us, John. Yeah,
it's fantastic every time.
Yeah, so one of the things, and so then Gus is not in right now. If you look at the most recent Kickstarter update, there's a fun little mini documentary about Gus going to China, and then we're going to really try over the course of our current campaign to make sure that you get to know everybody involved, because I think something that I get asked a lot is like, what kind of PR did you use, or who did this and who did that? It's like, it's just us, right? And I think it's really important. Like when we were working on OTTO, we had that feeling of like, oh no, we're like getting behind, or we didn't reply to this message, or all those sorts of things. And it felt like you could never sort of get ahead of it. But the more that we've communicated with people that, hey, we're just like you, we're just working on this and we're doing everything that we can, the better it's been, the more supportive the community has been.
So you spoke a little bit about kind of like community and communicating with your backers. What was that like during the first and second campaign?
Oh man, it's the sort of ideas and concepts are very similar, but the scale is completely different. We're talking about 2 orders of magnitude for us. So it went from 400 backers to 40,000. But I can say, first of all, that like, as far as the community is concerned, if we hadn't done OTTO first, CHIP would have never been possible.
Interesting. Tell me
not just in terms of like, hey, the idea for CHIP came from OTTO.
Sure.
But I mean, in terms of managing the community, like, when we launched the CHIP campaign, we had, there were 9 of us, and there were 3 of us when we launched OTTO. Right, and so there's just 3 of us, and so all the new folks were like, "Oh man, I'm so nervous," and it's like, we got this. We've done this once before, right? And that was this thing where understanding how intense it is, right? And we're talking about OTTO had 400 backers. Like it's relatively small in the scope of the hardware space. It's pretty good size for some of the other categories. That was the most exciting thing I had done in my life up to that point. Right.
Amazing. No, it's amazing. This is a good point to kind of like pause for a second and say that if anybody out there has any burning amazing questions for Dave, you can find us on Google+, on Twitter at Kickstarter Tips, and on our Facebook page. Dave, the next thing that I want to ask you.
Okay.
Just speaking a little more about like what it's like to manage these campaigns and go from one to the next, because repeat creators is definitely something that like I think about a lot and what that experience is like. What was like the big thing that you remembered for the first one that transitioned into the second one that gave you that confidence?
Oh man, so I mean the thing that we did with OTTO was we called it an animated GIF camera. Right, and that was sort of when we first met, John, you were telling me about Jay Silver's campaign Makey, which is still to this day like phenomenal, right?
Of course.
And I remember when I was first learning about Kickstarter, when that thing launched, just sort of in the early days, I was listening to Morning Edition on NPR, and they were talking about the banana piano. Right?
Yeah.
And the banana piano is brilliant because it encapsulates everything that Jay's trying to do with his project into one idea that you can explain that's both ridiculous and fun, and also communicates the whole essence of it, and gets people excited about it. What is it really? Okay, well, it's an Arduino compatible, capacitive touch board for experimentation with physical. No, it's a banana piano, right? And so, like, that's where the GIF aspect of OTTO came from. We knew we wanted to make this sort of tool for experimenting with photography. We needed a way for it to be accessible for people and have that sort of pathway into what we're trying to accomplish.
Of course, yeah.
And that's where the GIF camera comes from. And that same idea goes into what we do with CHIP. And it's not just about how we talk about it, it's also how we build things, right? Just like Makey, just like OTTO, just like CHIP, we want it to be accessible and inviting to everyone, right? But we want to make sure that when, the hardcore nerds like us get involved with it, it's also rewarding.
Of course, yeah. I mean, like when I describe the project to people, I kind of go back and forth, And kind of depending on the audience, I switch between, look, it's like a really simple computer that just works because now everything just works all the time. Or, switching to and saying like, it's a system on a chip. Like it's a lot like an Arduino, but you can do more with it. It's a lot like a Raspberry Pi, but it's mainline Linux, like all these things. Like it's interesting how from audience to audience, you can switch things up and get like a lot more technical or like get a lot more abstract. We've probably had this conversation. I tend to tell people that it's a lot like a Pixar movie, like speaking in two different voices.
Oh, absolutely. And that's kind of the thing is talking about who your audience is. Like, we knew that people like us would understand what we were trying to accomplish. And the same goes for OTTO, right? Like if you look at who the backers are, a lot of them are friends of ours, friends of friends, people in our sort of interactive art world. Mm-hmm. But it's all about figuring out, okay, well, who do you know is already part of your community that is going to just be really excited about this sort of intrinsically because they understand the features, right. They understand what it does. And then who is that other group of people that you wish understood what you were doing? And we spent a lot of time talking about them and making sure that both from a technical and interaction perspective and also how we talk about CHIP, that their sort of needs were met. And so like, hey, here is the things you can do with it, because you can't just assume that everyone knows.
That's it. That's awesome. And we both, like you mentioned this before, we both come from kind of like design, tech, interactive arts background. So I expect that we'll see a lot of people in that world like really embracing and using CHIP. What do you want them to do with it? Like, what are some things that like you want to see out in the world happen as a result of CHIP? Oh
man, I mean, the list is incredibly long, and there's a sort of fun. Just two, right? Yeah. This is the first thing I'll say is we asked this question in the middle of the campaign because you kind of realize like, oh man, like we have a bunch of ideas, but maybe we don't know. Right. And so we got 150 different ideas just on Kickstarter comments of people telling us the things they wanted to do, which was awesome. And we still get tweets, and it's fantastic. But for us, like one of the things I would say is when the computer is $9, you can use a lot of them. Right, and you can do stuff with a lot of computers.
Interesting. Okay.
Because now $1,000 goes a really long way.
That's amazing. So what do you do with 100 computers?
You tell me, John. Right? What do you do with 1,000? Right. Yeah. And so I think it opens up a new kind of. If we're talking about art and interactive art specifically, it opens up a new palette of things to play with, and that's enormously exciting to me personally. But also making it really, really tiny and really, really inexpensive means that you can put it into stuff where you wouldn't think it would go, mm-hmm. and just leave it there. And that's one of the reasons we built in the battery charging, just like OTTO, is that we want you to put we want to see people sneak it into stuff that doesn't look like it has it in there.
Right.
And, so that's those two things, those two ideas are really enormously exciting to us. I mean, yeah. That's
fantastic. So you're basically saying like, let's stop talking about ubiquitous computing and let's just do it.
Oh yeah.
That's
come on. Yeah. Let's do it.
What's going on right now? Like what is the team up to right now? What's production like? I assume that you're looking towards like the fulfillment side of things. How are you approaching that? How are you communicating with your backers right now?
So, man, there are so many things going on right now. So if you look at our last update, it is all over the place. It's really long. It's got a lot of different content in it and different angles. What I'll say is that our project is probably, I don't know if it's atypical or not, but it touches on a lot of different communities and a lot of different kinds of things that need to be done. Mm-hmm. So we have this enormous scale. So we have like the shipping and fulfillment and logistics part of what we do is pretty complicated. But we also have, this enormous open source effort that's going on with CHIP. So CHIP is completely open source. So we spend a lot of energy and time working with the open source community to document things that are happening, commit code, do pull requests.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's really cool. And so right now there's people working on the actual Linux kernel and software, mm-hmm.
which
is a big part of what we do. And joining the Linux Foundation and being a sort of better citizen of that community is a big thing that we're working on. There's, of course, the production of the alpha chips to go to our kernel hacker backers. Right. And then, we've got a whole sort of slew of design exercises that are ongoing that we're going to talk about more as we go forward on Pocket Chip and some of the other things that work with CHIP. But what I'd say is that if you look at what we did in terms of rollout of our rewards, we wanted to keep them staged so that we would minimize the risk as we release things. It's not a question of we want to limit the number of chips that we sell or want to limit the number that each person can buy. We want people to have, like I said, as many as they want, and there will always be $9. But we don't want to get into a situation where we have this huge backlog with this like nebulous commitment date. We wanted to really say, okay, here's a nice little chunk of work we can do. And every time we do a little chunk, we learn a little bit more, and we incorporate that learning into our process. And by the time we reach full-scale production, there's an enormous amount of experience that we've gained about how this actually works.
It sounds like a really sensible rollout plan. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was, I think people were a little confused by that. And frankly, the other thing I'll say about Kickstarter campaigns is there's that expression, right? Good artists borrow, great artists steal. There's so many awesome campaigns out there. Like looking at the rollout plan, like before we even started working on CHIP as a product, we just looked at this stuff and said, like, why are these guys doing this, right? And we really put thought into like, oh, well, let's talk to them and let's see like what the challenges were. Let's read the updates. I mean, Kickstarter itself is an enormous resource, even just to learn about the product development process. Definitely. And see like, oh man, these guys way overcommitted and like they underestimated the tooling costs, or they did the opposite. Let's do it this way. And that's kind of how we got this rollout plan.
What was a project that you really admired that you saw out there?
Oh, us? I mean, there was a 3D printer project. What was it called? TICO. Yeah.
Yes.
TICO was really, really cool to us because if you look at what they were doing, it was very much like in the same spirit. They're like, let's take this awesome thing. Let's make it affordable for regular people, and let's make it easy enough so that those people can really appreciate how awesome it is.
Fantastic.
And those guys, I mean, I love what they did. And they also had the stage rollout, which I really loved. And there were a number of campaigns that done that. And their product is also complicated, so there's precedent for it. I mean, the thing is, it's important. We did a lot of things differently in our campaign that I think a lot of people may or may not have noticed. But it's important to pick which wheel you want to reinvent, and not just to sort of reinvent all of them, because there's not enough time for that.
Right.
But anyway.
Great. Is there anything else that you kind of like that's like top of mind right now that like you and the team are thinking about? Just kind of some closing thoughts about like where CHIP is going, just big picture stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, the thing I want to say is that there was 3 of us when we made OTTO, and I fully hope that we're not, there's no way we're going to be the last group of a small team to make something that is, understood and accessed by a large group of people through Kickstarter or other places.
Right.
And the thing that we need to do is not keep redoing each other's work. It's important that we all share the things that we've learned, so that the next, 3 people that go to China and come back with some wacky idea, actually can make it work in a year's less time than we spent on it, right? And that's
right.
The goal here is that we want to enable as many people as possible to build these things that they're imagining and make them sustainable.
Right.
It was with great pain that we could only make a few autos,
right.
But the idea, out of OTTO comes CHIP and the ability to make hopefully thousands of different projects like it.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing. You're verging on kind of like enabling everybody to just make like whatever idea they have in whatever quantity they have without any sort of compromises in an accessible way that like most people can't really do.
I mean, I hope we can pull off this idea of the whole community working together to make it possible. And I say this every time I get a chance to talk to people is. This really is an open source project. It really is a community-driven project. This would not have been possible without the support of our backers. And already a number of backers have been actively helping us doing real work. People reviewing schematics, like improving the design. And the more that the Kickstarter community engages with us, even after they've backed the project, the better it's ultimately going to be and the more successful it will be in the long term. So if you're seeing this, backers, like, we're here, call us, like email us, get on the forum. We read everything and we try our best to get back to you.
That's fantastic. Dave, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really fun, man.
Right on, John. Thank you so much for having me.
Always inspiring. Always inspiring. Always
Thanks,
cool to hear what you're up to. Enjoy the rest of your day. Say hi to the team for us.
Will do.
Take
care.
Bye.